Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Decoding Business Behaviours. I'm joined this week by Daniela Mamica, who is a executive director at Aspire Recruitment, and she can talk to you about. She's going to talk with us this week about hiring for behaviours. So we've discussed where we begin, we've discussed what happens when things don't exactly go to plan, and we're now going to talk about how you build your team, how you build a behaviours based team. So Danny, I guess let's start with what's the process that you have to go through, first of all, to hire for behaviours rather than hiring for experience?
Yes, absolutely. And hello, Tommy. Hello, everyone. So the first thing is you have to have your behaviors, right? So I know you've covered this in previous episodes, but before you can even start thinking about your hiring process and hiring to behaviors, you need to have established what those behaviors are. Otherwise, it's impossible. So the first thing that we did here as a business is obviously understand who we are, what's our identity, and what are the behaviors that we feel make successful recruitment consultants in the context that we're in. Once those were decided and put in place and rolled out, we then took those and built them into our interview process. So the way that we have put that into our interview process is by using the behaviors and putting competency based questions around each behavior and asking the same questions to every candidate we interview and scoring them on the same scoring mechanism. So that is really, really fair. So, taking one of our behaviors, growth mindset, we would have a question which might be something like, tell us about the last time you felt really passionate about learning something new. We would get an answer and then we would score that answer based on that behavior. So, it's now intertwined into that interview process, and that's how we've done it.
So it's not necessarily asking them a question that is, give us an example where you showed the behaviour. It's a question that's going to lead them to an answer where they demonstrate that behaviour.
Absolutely that. Yeah, absolutely that. We are quite honest and upfront. We do tell them what our five core behaviors are. And I will also say this question will be aligned to this behavior, but the questioning is not directly attached to that behavior because we want to get them thinking kind of bigger picture and wider context. So yeah, it doesn't it's not as clear cut as when was the last time you demonstrated this behavior. Sorry, it's more of a convoluted way to get there.
And is this a first interview or a second interview process or both?
It's normally at the first stage. So our second stage interviews, we tend to do, if it's experienced consultants, we tend to do some kind of presentation. If they're not experienced, we tend to do more of a role play. So in the first interview, we do the behaviors, and also we want to do it off the bat because actually this is what's really important for us now when we're coming to hiring people into our business. So we want to do in the first stage. We want to make sure that every single person that is getting to second, let alone coming into the business, demonstrates those behaviors. If at first stage we go through the questions and they score quite low, but still pass and move to a second, we might revisit some of those questions and some of those behaviors. But on a whole, it's a first stage where we ask those questions.
Perfect. And you talked about your structure with the questions that you have. Are they the only questions you ask, or do you ask other questions in there, or is it just questions around their behavioural fit?
Yeah, good question. We would do a what you call a normal Q&A interview alongside. So our first interview will normally include a bit around the candidate and their experience and their aspirations and their career goals. So you'll have your normal standard Q&A interview questions, and then we just ensure that we allow them enough time to also cover the behaviors and the questions to demonstrate those behaviors. So it will be a combination of the two. We will probably spend near on half of the interview focused around the behaviors and getting the candidates to demonstrate that they have those behaviors.
Okay, cool. And how do you grade them? So you said you've got a sort of general scoring system. Is it a 1 to 5, and then you take an average at the end? Is it a cumulative score? How does that scoring system work?
Yeah, it's 1 to 4 or 1 to 5, and then we add that up, and then we have a pass rate. So it's fairly straightforward. It's not over complicated, but it's demonstrates this behaviour. demonstrates this behavior a little bit, doesn't demonstrate this behavior. So it's pretty straightforward, pretty standard. And then we add that score and have a pass rate.
And would you consider someone if they hit maybe 4 of 5 or 3 of 5?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We would. What we do also have is we do have at least 3 questions per behavior. So we have 5 behaviors, and then we'll have at least 3 questions per behavior. So if we feel, especially at junior level, if we feel like a question maybe hasn't quite got the candidate there in terms of understanding exactly what we're trying to get, we do have an opportunity to ask a second question aligned to that behavior to get them to that answer. Because, you know, with interviewing, we know candidates can be nervous, and there's that to contend with. So we want to help them answer them in the best possible way. We want them to do well, of course. So yes, like if someone doesn't demonstrate one behavior, we would still consider, and if someone doesn't demonstrate 2 of the 5, we would still consider. But if someone scored low, below a 2, 3 across more than 2 behaviors, then they're then ultimately not going to be quite right. But as I said, sometimes candidates maybe just don't use quite the right example or don't have quite the right answer to get a high score. It doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have that behavior. Maybe they just haven't used the right example. So if we believe that is the case, we'll try and get them there. But ultimately, if they're not demonstrating enough of those behaviors or scoring highly enough, then they're ultimately not going to be quite right for us.
If you we've talked about previously, what if your high performer doesn't fit with behaviors, and I think that question's equally relevant here. What if on paper you've got a fantastic prospect, they've got all the right experience, they tick the boxes in terms of the type of level you're looking for, but their behaviors just don't match. What do you do there, and talk about as a particularly as the person who's maybe making that hiring decision, what do you have to do with your own mindset there?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I always remember a saying that our chairman and founder, Paul Farrer, used to always say to me, and that was hire for attitude, train for skill. Ultimately, if someone lacks certain skill, whatever that might be, you can teach them. You can teach someone. If in my sector, if someone doesn't know how to use Google AdWords, you can teach them how to use Google AdWords. Someone doesn't know a certain platform or a certain process, you can teach them that. But yeah, going back to Paul, he used to always say that. But what you can't teach someone is a behavior and a value. That they've either got it or they don't. Um, so for me, it's really easier to know. It doesn't matter what's on paper. It doesn't matter, what they've achieved or what they might go on to achieve. Ultimately, if they're not demonstrating the right behaviors that we feel are really important to us as a business and who we are and to our identity and our culture, long term, it's not going to be right for them. It's not going to be right for us. So it would be a no. It would be a no if they're not demonstrating those behaviors. And I just always remember that saying. It's like ingrained in me. Always hire for attitude, train for skill.
What are the benefits you've seen from hiring for behaviors rather than for experience?
Yeah, the one that always stands out to me is 110%. It's engagement. How engaged that person or persons are when they walk through the door on their first day, their first week, their first month. And we've just done a entry level intake here at Aspire recently. So we had lots of new starters join in January, and they were all hired towards those behaviours. And what we've seen in that intake and in that hire, because there's a few people that join us rather than just the one, it's just their engagement level and their want to be good at their job and want to be here and want to learn, just really inquisitive, asking lots of questions, really really positive. And where we've hired where previously where we haven't hired to those behaviors, we haven't had that level of engagement. So that's been a real key and noticeable thing for me. So yeah, really engaged, also just really positive. too, because they've got they've got the right behaviors, and they're with people that have got similar behaviors as well. And we tend to see that longevity with those people too, again, because there's just that cohesiveness internally around the individuals, and how we work and our processes. So yeah, I would definitely say those are the things that stick out.
And they almost snap into place, don't they, like a jigsaw piece, in that maybe they're not immediately successful, but they just fit your piece. They're immediately a part of the company. They're not a new person on the periphery. They're just in, aren't they?
100%, yeah, and I think we underestimate that. Um, these people who've been in their business for 3 months, and they're part of teams that you think they've been part of for a long, long time. So yeah, that's a really good point. Definitely agree.
They just join in with ease. Um, and I guess the last piece I wanted to touch on is from your experience as a you've been a manager, you've been a director, now you're an executive director. You've worked under a non-behaviors based business and now a behaviors centric business. As a leader, how do you have to transition yourself? How do you have to make a change in order to adapt?
Well, first of all, you have to demonstrate those behaviors. There's no getting away from that, unfortunately. Luckily, I was already there. But yes, think, as a leader or as a manager, when you are introducing behaviors into a business, and intertwining those behaviors into not just your hiring process, which is what we're talking here, but I know you'll probably cover this across other podcasts, but around performance and promotions and pay rises, it's going to be intertwined across everything. Um, you have to live and breathe it. As a leader, as a manager, you have to lead from the front, and therefore, firstly and most importantly, you have to demonstrate those behaviors. So for me, personally, it was about understanding, okay, what exactly are these behaviors in terms of how would we define them, and then how do you actively demonstrate them, and how what kind of actions or things would not demonstrate them. So it is a mindset shift, and it's really making sure that you as an individual understand them, you as an individual embody them and lead from the front. And then it's just the process element, it's changing your one-to-one, it's changing your monthly reviews, it's changing your performance, again, to really intertwine those behaviors. And for me, in terms of the management piece of it, is again just making sure I understand what those behaviors are, and then the examples that demonstrate those behaviors and the examples that don't demonstrate those behaviors. So it is tough. It's not an easy thing to do. It takes time as well. I think it's taken us quite a bit of time to really get it and actually really like work towards them and manage towards them. But yeah, I think it's just ensuring that I demonstrate them and then I intertwine them into all of my management and leadership day-to-day duties as well.
And as we mentioned on last week's podcast, sticking with them in the face of a dip and a downturn and going, actually, in the long term, we'll see the benefit, even if in the short term it feels like we've taken a step back, we're about to take a further step forward.
Yeah, 100%. And it's been a tough journey. It's not an easy one, but it's in aspects, but it was also easy because I think everyone recognizes why they are the behaviors that they are, and recognizes that, with a growth mindset, like, and accountability, and they people can buy into them. I think it's more so just understanding what they are, and as I said, how you demonstrate them and how you don't demonstrate them, and picking up yourself and individuals when you're not demonstrating them. Yeah, it's harder and tougher in some aspects, but then also easy in other ways. I think people do buy into them. It's much nicer talking about behavior than it is about a KPI, for example. But yeah, it's been tough at times, and you're so right. When things are tough, it's yeah, remembering the core behaviors, and working towards them.